The following is an original production of AZPM News.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, I'll talk with three powerfully creative women who each have fascinating stories to share. Famed actor Marsha Mason returns to Tucson to direct The Roommate for the Arizona Theater Company. Author Jacquelyn Jackson shares stories from the Female Rouge, a memoir of living fiercely. And why is there an annual Ostrich festival in Chandler? Historian Janelle Molony talks about her book Birds Gone Wild and other stories of Arizona ostrich ranching. That's all next on Arizona Spotlight. Marsha Mason has had a very successful career as a stage and screen performer and director. Nominated for 4 Oscars, her career as a leading lady in film was spectacular, but there was more that she wanted to do. So Marsha Mason largely walked away from Hollywood and found the places where practicing her art made her the happiest. This has included directing plays here in Tucson and Tempe as part of the Arizona Theater Company. The next production is The Roommate, which gave me a chance to talk with the unforgettable Marsha Mason.
The Roommate is by Jen Silverman, and it's a wonderful play about 2 women who meet, and they're very, very different creatures, and they gain something from each other in a really beautiful and lovely way. And it's very funny and very touching, so I think it's going to be a wonderful entertainment. And fortunately, I was the associate director for the Broadway show under Jack O'Brien directing it, Patti LuPone and Mia Farrow. So I'm very familiar with the material. And in fact, I had to go on for Mia right after we opened because she came down with COVID, and we hadn't rehearsed the understudy that much. So Patti said, well, let's get Marsha to go on with the book, so that we didn't have to close it down. Otherwise, we might have had to close the show down. So it all worked out great. And consequently, the artistic director here, Matt August, who was also trained under Jack O'Brien, he came to the opening night and I met him. And he asked me if I would be interested in doing it here. And I said, sure.
The 2 women who were starring in the play, what are they bringing to the stage that you find really exciting as their director?
First of all, they're beautifully trained. They have a lot of experience. Sarah Gettelfinger, who's playing Robin, was just recently on Broadway with Water for Elephants and has had a long career both as a singer and dancer as well as an actor. And Angela and I had worked together before at Bucks County Playhouse, and she's Juilliard trained and a really incredible actor and has worked on Broadway and off-Broadway as well as in regionals. So I have 2 very professional, wonderful women to bring this play to Arizona.
What is your commitment to the Arizona Theater Company? Why do you keep coming back?
I like it here. First of all, the people are really professional. The work is extraordinary, and they really know what they're doing. This whole crew, as far as the design department, the stage management, the lighting design department, all of the various departments that come together, the costume department, these people are just incredible. I can't speak highly enough about them. It's just been a joy, really, to work with everybody here.
I have a question that I wanted to ask you, and you're free to turn this down if you don't want to get into it, if it's too personal. 2 of your Academy Award nominations came from films that you did with James Caan. And
right.
I wonder, Marsha, if you want to share anything about the process that you went through or the reaction you had when you heard that James had passed.
Several months before Jimmy passed, there is a theater program that this fellow started where he takes famous people and the things that they've been quoted as saying, and he puts it together as a collage of really wonderful takes and everything. And fortunately, he had a play, a one-act play that was shorter, and he decided that we would tape it for radio, not for performance. So he got a hold of Jimmy, and Jimmy said yes. So we had this wonderful experience of recording this 10-minute play together for the program, and it was so cool that we hadn't seen each other in a long time. So I felt really, really kind of wonderful about it all. And then when I heard that Jimmy had passed, of course, I was so grateful that I had that brief time after all those years to work with him again for just a little 10-minute play. So it really worked out well.
A nice moment of reunion.
Yeah, totally. A lovely moment of reunion. Yes.
On YouTube, I discovered this young man living in Ireland who is living with Down syndrome. And he does one-question interviews. And it's always the same question. He meets people from all walks of life, and he's met many successful celebrities and entertainers and politicians and advocates for people living with disability. And he asks them all the same question. And so with all respect to this young man who I've never met, I'm going to borrow his question, and I'm going to ask you.
Oh, great.
Okay?
Okay.
What do you love about your life?
Everything. I like the sad times, I like the bad times, and I love the good times. I like everything about my life these days, so.
Well, that's a great
everything.
Answer. Congratulations. Well,
thank you.
I guess I have one more thing to ask. Just because you spend so much time in Tucson working at Arizona Theater Company, I just wonder if there's something else about our city that appeals to you. What's something you found in Tucson that really rings your bell?
Well, the people are really, really nice. I find that there's a gentleness here that is quite lovely. And then maybe because also, it's college town, there's a youthful sense of things here, as well as there was a matinee of the ballet at the theater here that we're going to be going into. And I looked down from a little balcony where we were rehearsing, and there were these older people, retired people probably, and more than one couple, many couples actually, I noticed were holding hands. And I just was so, touched by it. And so maybe that's where I sense this sweetness. The other thing that's kind of wonderful is the various flora and fauna you have. There's a sweetness and there are interesting scents in the air from the plants. And fortunately, there was a little bit of rain when I first came last week, or the week before, and the air was so lovely, seeing the mountains without any real smog or anything. It was really quite beautiful. So you have a very nice environment here.
I spoke with Marsha Mason. She directs The Roommate for the Arizona Theater Company, with performances March 15th through April 4th at the Temple of Music and Art. Then the show heads to Tempe for a further run. There's a link for more information on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Author and yoga teacher Jacquelyn L. Jackson shares a lot of intimate detail about her life in the book The Female Rouge, a memoir of living fiercely. Jackson will be one of more than 300 writers appearing at this weekend's Tucson Festival of Books, and she joins me now to talk about her work. Towards the end of this interview, Jackson shares an account of being an eyewitness to the shooting that wounded Gabrielle Giffords and killed 6 others in 2011, content which may not be suitable for all listeners.
This book had been simmering inside me and gone through a couple iterations before, as the book starts, the experience in the Uffizi Gallery in Italy. And that experience of being in there among all those pictures and literally feeling the eyes of every female locked in oil clay and just glaring at me saying, live the life we couldn't live. And then all the male gods and conquerors and kings, and most of the women were virgins and all that. Anyway, it was a very powerful panic attack I had, and then followed up by the dream of find my rogue, I have to find my rogue, which is what gave it the Rogue name. And so when that happened, the book literally flowed out of me. And a lot of people have said, how can you write stuff? There is personal in there, but none of it is gratuitous. It's all very much in service of the main message of the Female Rouge, which is know what history's done, know the length of time. There's been so much oppression, narrowing, silencing of females through history. And there's a lot of history in the book. And understand that and know that you do have the brain plasticity, if you will, to change your response to it and kind of forge a new path forward, which is what Rogue is about to me.
To change your reaction to what exactly?
My book goes through that sense I had as a little girl, climbing trees, digging through dirt, not thinking, did I look fat? Or, gee, should I eat this donut? Just really free. And I think the whole experience of puberty for boys and girls, and this is definitely a female story, but it's so powerful what happens and how you're almost literally, as the hormones seep in, you're drawn out of your body to worry so much more about what it looks like, the shape, instead of your heart, your divinity, your creativity, your imagination. And then we're stuck out there for a long, long time, which I think this book unfolds over time. And to finally reach a point where that's not who I am, that's how I'm perceived, but there's a lot of stuff inside me that is who I truly am, and I want to bring it out there into the world. And so it's sort of bypassing in your brain, if you will, some of the, worry about this. Do you have the right clothes on? You should lose 5 pounds, whatever it is. There's a whole lot of that. Men have it too. I think it's hard to be a man in this world. But I think what we're watching now, just in our culture, it just feels like we're going backwards a little bit. I think it's real important to stay with this, get off that path that's been so well trod, and find a different way forward.
As an adult woman now, Jacquelyn, what does reconnecting with your rogue energy bring to you? What does it let you do?
I think it was there when I wrote this book. I think it's there, the importance of knowing my voice, my truth, and sharing that. Even with some of it's difficult, some of it I'm not proud of, but it's what I've gone through to become who I am today. Would have loved to have been like where I am now in my 20s and 30s, but it takes time. It takes time, and there's not a lot of outside encouragement really to do it. It's a really internal thing.
It's interesting to me, the connection between the museum in Italy and the panic attack that you had there as you felt the weight of expectation, with the fact that the book itself has a kind of pictures at an exhibition feel to it, as if we're in this gallery now and it has this theme and we're looking at these objects and learning about your life, and then we'll move into another gallery next. I like how you bring up other women you have known throughout your life and without judgment share their roguiness, if I can use that word, with the reader. Was it ever a difficult thing for you to choose what to write about next?
It really did flow. And I've been a writer for years. I love to write. The writing is much easier than the selling of books, certainly. I just knew throughout my life the ones who've been the most helpful to me in history and that I've known, who inspired me just to perceive a little differently, look a little differently inside. All this stuff with dreams, I think, is vital to this. And that was a gift from my mom. She was trusted and believed in them. And I just think about the dimensionality of dreams. It takes us out of this third dimensional enclosure and opens up what, there's fourth dimensional space out there. I mean, Stephen Hawking said he couldn't conceive what it looked like, but I think you see it in dreams every night. It's a huge, brilliant part of us, and we're not trained to listen. Smartest part of me, certainly, and I've listened a number of times through my life, and it's always come through and been right.
You've experienced trauma in your life, and you talk about the exhaustion that it can cause. Even when you do have the rogue energy with you, it can sometimes still be exhausting. But there's also exhilaration that you find in the encounter with the bobcat. What do you have to say about that ratio between exhaustion and exhilaration?
Well, I think I listen to it a lot more carefully because exhaustion can come more often. I've always been extroverted and people person, and I find that I need a lot more pulling in and quiet and recharge, if you will, through nature. Certainly this Sonoran Desert, we moved here in 2004, and I've completely fallen in love with it. But there's such a stark beauty and wisdom, I think, to the Sonoran Desert, and that recharges me. So I think that if anything, it's a balance between being out there more, let's go to dinner, let's do this, which I've done for a long time, and the quieter going in, and it kind of nurtures creative spaces in me and keeps the tap flowing, if you will.
In the interest of full disclosure, your husband, Peter Michaels, used to work here at AZPM, was the news director for many years, and he actually gave me a chance way back in 2007 to host this show. Also, you and I collaborated on a series called Teachers' Voices for a little while that aired on Spotlight. In addition to losing your family members over the years, you were a firsthand witness to what occurred 15 years ago when Gabrielle Giffords and members of her team and the local community were gunned down in that Safeway parking lot. If it's true that wisdom can come from trauma, what is something that experience gave you that doesn't make you weaker, but instead empowers your rogue energy?
I think it was a tremendous amount. That chapter, like they're short chapters, but it's called Turning Point. I worked for Gabby for a year and a half as her director of outreach, and had gone to Safeway that day just to buy salad dressing. And so these were my friends, colleagues, and I parked 4 slots from the front of the store. I wasn't working for her then, but I had put many of those on for her. Anyway, I hugged Gabe, and he's like, "You're getting married, I'm so excited." And he said, "Not for a year and a half. We've got plenty of time." And he was dead about 2 minutes later.
Gabe Zimmerman.
And then Ron Barber asked me if Peter, who was AZPM, if you guys were going to cover it. And I said, "I don't know." And I reached in my purse to get my cell phone, and I left it in the car. So then I hugged Pam Simon, and she said, "Go hug Gabby." If I had done that, I would have definitely gotten shot. But I said, "No, she's busy. Let me go get my phone. I got to tell Ron." So I did. I dashed to my car in running clothes, 4 slots from the front. As soon as I hit the open button, it was poof, 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 and turn around. And I just watched him like he was watering the lawn, shooting my friends. So I did run back in to help. I remember looking down on Gabby, and the voice in me, and this gets to the wisdom, said, "Don't turn left." And if I'd done one little bit of my head to the left, I would have seen Ron bleeding out, Gabe, Pam shot. And so it was a miracle to me. And that was, to me, a stopping point in my life. When something like that happens, you realize it can change on an instant and faster than that. And that's when I think I began the rogue process of, what am I doing? Who am I working for? What do I really want to do? And that's when I did go back and got my yoga teacher certification. I began writing a lot more in earnest. It brings me joy, and I'm fortunate I've been able to make that turn. But again, it doesn't happen in an instant. The change doesn't. It takes time, a lot of attention inside, a lot of self-care, and learning about your body. There's a lot of body in this book, because I've a lot of emphasis is my therapeutic work has been female body in particular. So it's know it, and
You talk about the stomach being an area that many women have wounds about.
In their bellies, in their hips, in their thighs, carry a lot of old stories. In yoga, we call that the junk drawers of the body. You kind of stuff emotion down there, stuff food down, stuff without, the body. And I did, through my yoga teacher training, a lot of anatomy and physiology training. It's incredible how smart we are in these bodies, and that physiologically and all, yeah.
Jacquelyn Jackson talked with me about her book, The Female Rouge, a memoir of living fiercely. She'll be a presenting author on Saturday at the Tucson Festival of Books, taking part in a panel called Who I Am in the Koffler Building at 10 a.m. Jackson will also be signing books under the Tucson Sentinel tent starting at 3 p.m. Proudly a native Arizonan, author Janelle Molony is a historian with exotic taste. Her new book, Birds Gone Wild and Other Stories of Arizona Ostrich Ranching, covers that subject in depth, but it was born out of a somewhat morbid piece of her own family's history. Next, Janelle Molony will explain and tell us as much about the ostrich industry in this state as we've got time to share.
In 1910, just in the city of Phoenix alone, there were 5,000 ostriches. That was a ratio of 2 humans to 1 ostrich. We were literally overrun with ostriches.
Well, how is it that Arizona and ostriches made a connection in the first place? I mean, what started the ostrich boom?
What really started it, in my opinion, well, we've got the females wanting their feathers. That was really a big shift in the fashion industry back in the day. I
assume it's like for women's hats.
Hats, dress trim, underwear trim, shoe adornments. It was out of control for a while. But bringing it to Arizona was a matter of professional jealousy and thinking, how can I avoid paying import taxes by sending ostrich feathers from South Africa to the United States? You see, the U.S. and Europe were the top purchasers. And so some farmers said, well, we don't want to pay all that, so let's just find an alternative place to raise ostriches, and then we won't have to pay all those extra tariffs, et cetera. So in 1882, 22 were brought to the United States, and in 1888, Arizona received our first baker's dozen.
Other than feathers, how would a prospective ostrich farmer expect to benefit from these animals?
The ostrich farmers of the day, or ostrich ranchers, we ranch livestock, we farm vegetables. But I guess if you say we're growing a feather on the bird, then we could be feather farmers. But they were excited about this industry because they were bringing in over $1 million a year for an animal that requires about 1/10 of the care to standard cattle and less than even a sheep. And so they made a huge profit on their investment.
And Arizona's climate was well suited to the birds.
More than perfect. Arizona is actually the closest comparison to the African savannas, which is their native climate, in the Western Hemisphere. So this is literally the best place in the world outside of the African savanna for an ostrich to live and thrive.
So was this sort of a get-rich-quick scheme like we hear about tulips at one time in Holland?
I wouldn't say it was quick. An ostrich chick will still take 3 or 4 years before it'll produce a single egg. But once they are around 9 months or a year, you can start clipping their feathers, and the quality just gets better and better as you breed them to that. You're going to feed them well. You're going to make sure that they're getting quality veterinary care, and you'll make longer, bigger, fluffier, thicker feathers than anywhere else. In fact, there was one rancher in Avondale, Mr. Cross, who started to crossbreed the redneck and the blue neck ostriches, and he produced feathers that made the South Africans very, very curious or jealous.
With all respect to your ancestor who sadly met their end, how did this ostrich stampede happen?
So in 1914, that very large Pan-American Ostrich Company in Avondale was closing. The president of the company had passed away, and they were liquidating all of their assets. And Dr. A.J. Chandler, founder of Chandler, Arizona, was purchasing 300 of those cheap birds at that point. But instead of doing what was normal, what was expected, to put them on a train car and have them delivered to the station that was about a half block away from the San Marcos Hotel, he decided to go with a publicity stunt to march these birds from Avondale to Chandler following different canal routes. So they brought them out about 5 miles. At that point, the neighborhood was no longer fenced. They left a portion that kind of like bumpers on a bowling alley. They were no longer being fenced in. And those ostriches, well, we learned they don't herd. They don't stay together. They go in any direction they feel like at any point. And they took off. They actually stampeded, and of course they scared a horse and buggy, and that's how my relative met her end. But they ended up in the deserts of Mesa. They ended up in the Rialto River. They scared a duck hunter in a river, and he thought maybe it was a duck, and he turned around and he thought, oh, that's not a duck. And so they took off, and the newspapers announced ostrich hunting, an Arizona sport. And they caught all except 70 of them that we still don't know where they ended up to this day.
Do we actually have any wild ostrich still existing in this state?
Not today, and really not back then either. Let's say you find an ostrich in your yard, and you know those feathers are worth money. Are you going to walk it back to its owner? Or are you going to collect that ostrich and cash in? So things like that happened. Also, we believe the Gila and Pima people were not so picky about hunting and eating them, and they are great eating, by the way. So that did happen often.
Does that mean that you've tried ostrich or perhaps even ostrich eggs?
Ostrich is comparable to the finest sushi tuna, the finest Wagyu beef. It is very expensive, but it is soft, sweet, nutty, red meat. It is not anything like a turkey. You just need a little butter, lemon juice, salt or soy sauce, and it's perfect.
Where exactly were you served ostrich?
It is available in Arizona through the Rooster Cogburn Ostrich Ranch. And there's also a food truck that is there on the weekends, and they make ostrich burgers for the guests.
Tell us about your book and your career as an author of unique Arizona history.
Birds Gone Wild is a humorous pop history of the history of Arizona's ostrich ranching industry from boom to bust. It's slightly unhinged, and it combines weird history with weird science and lots of weird humor. I've been writing mostly about family histories for about 5 years. So I love writing about my family who lives in the Southwest and their explorations. And unfortunately, in this case, they're sad endings. But hey, even a sad story can be a great story.
Janelle Molony told me that a group of ostriches is not called a flock, a herd, or even a murder. It's called a troop. Molony will be at the Rooster Cogburn Ostrich Ranch booth at the 38th Annual Chandler Ostrich Festival, which runs 2 weekends, March 13th through the 15th and the 20th through the 22nd. She'll be there to meet fans and sign copies of her book, Birds Gone Wild. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM and is posted weekly at azpm.org. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Sarah Ariano. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
This has been an original production of AZPM News.